Welcome to Success Factors from a Different Angle. My name is Pablo Estuardo, and today I'm going to be talking about a feature in the system called the check tool. Now, before I get into the content, disclaimers. Number one, as always, anything and everything that I said today is my own and does not represent the views or opinions of my current employer. And number two, this is very informal, as you can see. Oh, and I have a third one today. You'll notice that I'm going to be sharing my screen, right? And this is going to be a new component out of these videos, really starting to look into the system. I'm not going to show configuration for the most part, no point on it, in my opinion. But I think I will be demoing a bunch of things, especially some of the newer functionality that is coming up in the various releases. All right, so with that, the check tool. So let me open my browser here. This is one of my sales demos. So the check tool, in very simple terms, is something that allows you to run a bunch of checks, right, if you will, across your various configuration or modules, and it basically tell you, okay, things are looking good, or the checks pass, or you know what, there are a couple of warnings here, so some things that seem inconsistent, or you got an error, right? Now, let me talk about the error. Once you get an error, doesn't really mean that things are really bad. It just means that you gotta look at it and understand what might be happening. All right, or at least that has been my experience. There might be a reason, perhaps you did something quote unquote user defined, right, or customized, and that might be being flagged as an error, but in reality it might not represent a problem. However, at the same time, but I've seen, sometimes you'll run it, you'll get errors, let's say in recruiting, and you can't really, it's interesting, right? Because you've been, let's say, live with recruiting forever, you haven't really experienced anything, the system is operational, you don't really have any problems until, let's say, you're trying to run this special report and you realize that you can't report on a particular data because whatever, there might be an error there, right? So for what it's worth, it's always good, in my opinion, to run the check tool and see, you might learn something about your current configuration. And the last thing I'll say before I show you the system is that it might be a good mechanism, right, to run it with your consultants, right, or with your implementation partner and talk about it, right? If you have a bunch of errors in the configuration, you gotta be able to explain them all, right? Because otherwise, most likely you're gonna experience issues within, whatever you found the errors there. All right. So how does it work? Well, first of all, you have to have access to run the tool, right? You can get that access through RBP. In this case, I'm an admin, so I can simply go ahead and click or search for check tool. Click on it. I'm going to be redirected to a page that look like this. So let's talk about the page first. So first of all, here under application, you have a drop-down menu that basically gives you the various groups of checks that the system has. Of course, it's going to be dependent on whatever you have enabled in the system. And for the most part, these are big chunks of data or chunks of configuration. So the various modules and things like, let's say, integration center or big functionality like that. Okay. Then on top of that, or in addition to that, you have this about the check tool button. So if you click on it, it tells you a little bit more about what it is, as well as you can export all the different checks, right, that the system checks against. And I'm talking hundreds of them. Let's see. Yeah, 321 checks. All right. Let's just pick a random one here. All right, this is a comp one. It says use this check to determine if there are any cyclic dependencies or planners, blah blah blah. All right, so that's just an example of something that will be run. Periodic job is scheduled. Right. So anyways, some of them fairly standard, something that your implementation consultant would do anyway. Some of them are actually quite technical, so typically you wouldn't really check against those. All right, so, but how does it work? You can select your application, right? So since we were talking about recruiting, let's select recruiting. You can expand the application that you get, right? And again, you get more granular as you go, so you have the ability to just, let's say in this case, if I just want to check or run my candidate profile template, I can simply click on the various checkboxes and it does that. Or I can click on this main one, just like any other software out there, right? And then I can run them all, right? So I got 21 checks here related to recruiting, right? Run it. And by the way, it doesn't really take long, so it's not like you have to wait any meaningful time. You know, you run it and fairly quickly you can see the results. Alright, so it looks like it's in pretty bad shape here. My configuration. So, alright, it looks like my candidate profile template is in pretty good shape. However, I did find some issues, so let's see some of them. Right, okay, so it's looking like, you know, I'm missing some attributes, or some attributes that are expected to be, in this case, true or required are not. Right? Again, just an example of some of the checks that you get. You cannot, by the way, take action to solve the errors or the warnings here. You'll have to go to, you know, each place within the system to take action over them. But at least you get the information here, and then you can react to it, rerun it, and see if it passes the quality check. Right. And again, you know, an error doesn't necessarily mean that it always needs to be fixed. Right? It just means that it found something that is inconsistent based on the standard configuration that is prescribed. So, you know, at a minimum, you should be able to explain what the error is. And it's very easy to use, as you can see. By the way, it's all hyperlinked, right? So you can just click on it and it'll tell you exactly, you know, what is happening. And also kudos to the product team on this, because the errors are actually very well described. So it's nothing kind of coded, right? That is English, but not really. You can, you know, the errors, you know, are fairly self-explanatory. At least that has been my experience. And then again, you get to learn a little bit more about what was exactly the check that was run. And then again, hyperlinks that it kind of tell, which is actually pretty cool. It tells you for like known errors in the as a KBA or knowledge-based articles. And of course, this will take you to the launchpad. All right. And then let me just run another one just for the sake of that. So I run the whole thing. Oh, there's only one check here. Okay, so it looks like I have a one related to my readiness. Right. Oh, and then the last thing that I'll say, with every release, there's a potential that they add more checks. All right. So the purpose of that comment is that, you know, it's good to at a minimum run it once you're implementing new things. But I always suggest to rerun it, right? At a minimum every time after a release happens, because you may get more checks, but also it's a good hygiene, in my opinion, to see what's the current state of the configuration. And once again, I highly recommend to be able to explain every single either warning or error that you get. Otherwise, it's very possible that you are going to experience some type of error or issue in the future. All right. So that's what I have for today. If you got anything out of today's video, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, tell all your friends about it, and I will see you